Welcome to Rich Conversations. Something I'm curious about is what life is like for people in different regions of the country and world. We're fortunate that we do have the technology to connect, even if the internet connection isn't always the strongest. So why not reach out to people and learn more about life and culture in their communities? Today we'll explore the Big Sky State, Montana, by chatting with Steph Burda. Those who have been following this podcast for a while will remember conversations this summer about cities and the future of our communities. Remington Tonar made a guest appearance for some of these. We discussed the potential of city residents spreading out with the emergence of COVID and remote technologies. Steph is someone who's made that jump, moving from Chicago to the small town of Livingston, Montana. She's working her same job as she did in the city and has been happy and grateful for her decision. In addition to listening to this podcast episode, you can also watch it on our new YouTube channel. The channel is simple. It's just my name, Rich Ebron. And aside from conversations, you can watch videos explaining puzzle pieces I've gained from books I've read, weekly thoughts, and the meanings behind the artwork in my last book, Primary Ponderings. Lots of good stuff on there. Are you ready to learn more about Montana? You can follow Steph at Right Brain Ranch. Let's begin. All right, so I have Steph Burda here, who is all the way in Montana. And something I'm very curious about, I have lived in the Midwest for all my life, and I'm just curious about other regions of the country. I want to know what it's like for them and, what our fellow Americans around the country are experiencing. So we did the first episode we kind of did like this was with my cousin Frank on Wisconsin culture. But now I have Steph here in Montana, who's joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Oh man, we must have met like 7 years ago, maybe in Chicago, Rich and I.
Yeah, we had this really odd job. Explain this job that we met. This was like in 2013, I want to say. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, didn't we work for like a high-end catering company?
Yeah, or like a company that like outsourced people to do like high-end. It was
really like
weird.
Serving. It was a lot of weddings. It was a lot of yuppie weddings. I mean, they were very nice. We saw a lot of really interesting warehouse spaces.
I think I only went to like two. I think I only worked like two of these, and then I was just done. I was like, I'm not.
That's okay. That's how that goes.
Yeah. Well, so what are you doing in Montana right now?
Yeah. So after 8 years in beautiful Chicago, I did relocate back home. I grew up here. Spent most of my life here in Livingston, Montana, specifically. Livingston is about 40 minutes from the northern entrance of Yellowstone National Park.
Really?
So, I live clearly in a very, very beautiful place. And given the current circumstances, it just felt like a good time to really embrace this new virtual life that we are trying to create for ourselves and enjoy some more time with family and just enjoy this space.
Speaking of spaces, you have one of the coolest setups. It looks like you're in the mountains. It's like kind of like this dark old wood. It's a nice setup you got there.
Thank you. Yeah, I do live in a very quintessential Montana home. It's a nice getaway for sure.
So I'm looking at a map of Montana right now. I have traveled through like I-94, I-90. So I'm aware of Billings and Missoula especially.
Yep.
And so Livingston is between there. It's like you said, it's just north of Yellowstone.
Yep, Livingston is in just south central Montana, very close to the Wyoming border.
Oh yeah, by Bozeman too.
Yes. Yep, just over the hill from Bozeman, actually.
Okay. So what do you like most about Montana?
You know, I was thinking about this. I mean, obviously my family is here. Obviously it's beautiful. I
Mhm.
mean, people are just fleeing the cities to start their lives here. But I think, honestly, and this is the writer in me, I guess, I think in the most American sense of the word, Montana is one of the most romantic places that I have ever known. I mean,
Yeah.
it's everything that you have seen in the movies or read about. I mean, it's still so wild and it's
Yeah.
rugged and it's vast. I believe we have like 27 million acres of public land that are
Okay.
accessible to residents. Currently we
How
have
many
like,
how many million acres are there in Montana for
oh
reference?
Lord, that's a great question. We should probably look that up really quickly because I don't want to misspeak at all.
Yeah, go ahead
Um,
though. I interrupted you. I'm going to listen and look this up at the same time.
Yeah, please. Let's look that up and then compare it to just like the amount of like recreational access that we'll have.
Yeah.
Um, because it's huge. I mean, it really is just one of like the few remaining frontiers in a modern America. At least that's how I see it. She's just there's just something about her that makes you want to just figure her out, and you just never will.
Yeah.
And I think people are certainly trying to, but I hope she stays pretty wild.
Montana. Montana. Yeah, I hear a lot about Montana. Not a whole lot where I didn't have to reach out to you. But so how would you describe Montana culture?
Sure. I think that is probably best illustrated by just the personal experience that I had recently. It is oddly enough beautiful and 50 degrees right now, but about a week ago we had just this insane, just historic snowstorm. We had about 2 feet in
Okay.
like 24 hours. And I was walking the streets of downtown. Livingston's about 7,000. We have a very, very quaint
Yeah,
downtown
that's
area.
a nice size, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's adorable. Um, and so I was just walking through the downtown, and obviously we have like, publicly funded plows. But for the most part, like they weren't able to pass through some of the residential streets or some of the downtown strips. So small business owners and just homeowners were just as concerned about their neighbor's sidewalk or their neighbor's vehicle,
Yeah.
or just a vehicle's ability to pass down the street. So we had just the town coming together on their four-wheelers and their own personal
Yeah.
plows and their shovels, just digging out the town.
Yeah.
So I think just seeing that just really solidified everything that I had known about
Mhm.
Montana culture, which is, despite it being, so different from, more of the progressive parts of the US, it really is a place of just great integrity and generosity, even still.
Yeah.
And so I do really appreciate all of those cozy aspects of a small town life. And I think that it keeps Montana residents just a little bit kinder.
Yeah. Yeah. 2 feet of snow and then now it's 50, hey? Nice.
Yeah, it was wild. I imagine snow, she'll be back next week. So we're enjoying this Indian
Oh, I'm
summer
sure.
for sure.
So I did look it up. It's 147,000 square miles.
Okay.
You said it was what, 27,000
27,
square miles of public
27
land?
million. So 27 million acres of
Oh,
public
acres.
lands.
Okay. I didn't look up acres.
Yeah, we measure a lot in acres, I guess, out here.
Yeah. Interesting. So it's still a big chunk.
Very large chunk. Yeah.
Okay. So Montana is one of the biggest states. So you have what? Texas, Montana, California, Alaska's the biggest, but it's not, down here. It's a big state. So what are the differences in the culture among the regions of the state?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly variance in your traditional ranching communities. You have communities of backcountry sportsmen that live here permanently. A lot of tourists constantly in different pockets
Okay.
of the state. And there are also a lot of I guess I'll define them as progressive pockets of, I guess, artists and the wealthy.
Like yuppie pockets?
Especially yeah, I guess we can call them yuppies, right? That's okay. We're definitely seeing a population of, people who are, I guess, essentially transplants who are fleeing from cities like Chicago to be closer to nature, and just have access to space, solitude, and just communities that genuinely care about conservation. Also have to mention very proud culture of distinct American Indian tribes across the state as well, of which I'm certainly no expert, but that is definitely a very important piece.
What are some of the big tribe names in Montana?
Crow Agency is certainly one of them.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there are a great many list of like federally recognized tribes in the state, and obviously there are like definitely subsects of each tribe too. I'm certainly no expert by any means. A great resource for that would definitely be primary sources themselves, or like the Museum of the Rockies in Bozeman. They probably have a lot of great information about.
Have you been to that museum?
I love it. Yeah, actually, I hear you're a big dinosaur fan.
Huge.
So you would be a big fan of that museum because, I mean, Montana is also like hotspot for dinosaur bones, man.
It totally is. That's on my list. Museum of the Rockies in Montana.
It is a very, very well done museum. And I can say that as someone who has frequented the field museum. It definitely holds its own against larger institutions like that. So you should definitely check it out when you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so you said there's a big sportsman culture there.
Yeah. So when I say sportsmen, I mean hikers, I mean skiers, snowboarders. We're very fond of our rivers here, so a lot of river rats. I guess I could consider myself one of them. And then a very large fishing and hunting culture as well. That's certainly a very prominent activity here in the state.
Have you ever gone fishing or hunted?
So I've been fishing. I feel like fishing is a little bit more accessible. I grew up in a family of hunters, so I am very familiar with the culture, with the relationship to that sport. It's hunting season right now. So that's basically all my family is talking about right now.
So what are those conversations like that they're talking about hunting?
Well, they all hunt together, which is really nice. It's definitely something that has brought my parents and my brothers closer. So every weekend, and also sometimes during the week as well, they're just planning out where they're going. My brothers actually filled their elk tags this past weekend. But I believe they have deer tags still. So I think that's still something that they're working toward. But Yeah, it's just something that I am, for the most part, completely unfazed by. It's also like what we ate growing up. So,
Yeah. So you're eating
I
elk.
mean, oh
Nice.
yeah, like almost every day, honestly. Like
Wow.
our freezer would be full of elk, and especially as my brothers got to an age where they were legally able to harvest as well. That's like at least three,
Yeah. And elk
elk
are big animals
tags.
too.
Very enormous. Yeah, and yeah, I definitely respect them a whole hell of a lot for having to pack those animals out of
Yeah.
the places that they pack them out of, because they're literally, unless they have like pack horses with them, they're literally carrying
Yeah.
it out on their backs, which is wild.
Do you ever get stopped in traffic with like moose or elk crossing the road?
Moose, not so much. Elk, uh, just because they're found at higher elevations, usually,
Okay.
no. I mean, the closer you get to the park, the more likely. So when I say park, I mean like Yellowstone.
Yeah.
The closer you get to Yellowstone, the more likely you are to run into that. But usually it's just, all deer on the road all the time. I'm shocked I
Okay.
haven't hit one yet in my Jeep.
Wow. So moose aren't in that region?
They are, but they're a little shyer, and they also don't really run in herds like
Yeah.
elk do. So it's just less likely to run into them.
Wow.
Mhm.
How often do you go to Yellowstone?
Uh, at least, since I moved to Chicago, I would make a point to see the park every October, at the end of tourist season. October is a really beautiful time, like right before a lot of
Mm.
the park closes for the winter, at least the road access. Um, have not been since the pandemic.
Okay.
It was a very popular spot for tourists this summer because I think that the pandemic really incited a lot of families to rediscover the Great American Road Trip.
Yes.
So,
Ah,
yeah.
yes, the Great American Road Trip.
Yep. So everyone and their mother were in Yellowstone National Park this summer. So I tried to avoid that, like the literal plague that we're
Well, so
in.
we got Yellowstone, but that's in Wyoming. What national parks are in Montana?
So there's actually a percentage of the park that's in Montana.
Mm.
The northern entrance is in Gardiner, which is technically in Montana. The
Okay.
majority of the park is in Wyoming, but we do get to have we get to have a very small piece. Glacier National Park is probably, I mean, you know,
Oh, I do see that the
Concept.
border goes into Montana a little
Yes,
bit.
it's
Yeah.
just right there. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sneaky.
I'd say that like national park purists will hate me for saying this, but Glacier tends to be the more photogenic of the two parks. I mean, they're very different. They're very
Yeah.
different, like climate wise. Glacier is in the northern region of the state.
Okay. Do you ever go up there?
That one is ours. I'm embarrassed to say that I have never been to Glacier. It just never happened. It is definitely on my list of things to do. And now that I am once again a permanent resident, it's a lot more likely that I'll get up there.
I'm looking at a map here of Montana. From Livingston at Glacier National Park, it looks like it's like from Chicago to like Memphis. It looks so long. It's on
Yeah,
totally opposite ends of the
yeah,
big state.
exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why. But I mean,
Well, you got some time now.
I do have time, and like growing up here, driving 7 hours to go play a high school softball game was not
Mhm.
unusual. So I shouldn't
Wow.
make any excuses for not going
Wow. So
to
when you moved
Glacier.
from Chicago, what was the first thing you wanted to do in Montana?
Well, I moved this summer, so that really opens up a lot of opportunity for
Hmm.
outdoor activities. That's definitely a good time to move. So honestly, in the summer, I'm on the river. The Yellowstone River flows right past and right through Livingston. So I am on the river as much as possible. It's one of my favorite places in the world.
What do you think people in Montana care most about?
Um, I think Montanans truly care about just living an honest life, which I think makes them generally suspicious of strangers
Mhm.
or who they may refer to as outsiders. But I think that that's true of really any rural state. And I know that
Yeah.
you're from Wisconsin
Yeah.
originally, so you might, I don't know how small of a town you're from, but I feel like you've probably felt
Yeah. Rural
this.
Wisconsin. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. For sure. So what? So we have this vast land out in the American West where Montana is. What makes Montana different than its neighbors? You have Idaho, Wyoming, the Dakotas, and Canada. What makes Montana special compared to those?
I wish that I had a very academic response to this question, but all I can say is sales tax.
Sales tax.
We don't have sales tax.
Wow.
Rejoice.
Wow. Okay. That's a pretty big deal. How many states
It
don't have
is,
sales tax?
oh man, that's a great question. It is a handful. 5.
Oregon, Nevada.
Actually, Oregon, New Hampshire,
Oh, New Hampshire.
Montana, Delaware, and Alaska.
Okay.
I
So
guess Nevada does have sales
I
tax.
heard someone who lives in Portland say once that there's no sales tax, but instead there's a conversation tax where each time you buy something, you have to like have more conversation with somebody because there's no sales tax. Is that true at all or no?
That's hilarious. I find myself, I guess, having a lot more conversations here maybe, but that's also just because I frequent a lot of small businesses, and I
Yeah.
guess at this point I'm familiar with a lot of them. So, but that's funny.
Yeah, that's funny. What would you say is the most popular sport in the state?
um yeah, so rather than trying to, I guess, define a population by a single sport, even though I mean high school athletics are very huge here. I think that's sort of a given with any collection of small towns.
Yeah,
Um, it's very important.
very important.
But I did read a statistic recently that 80% of Montanans pursue some sort of outdoor recreation, which makes sense. So I mean, that could mean, like we discussed before, skiing, hiking, rafting, kayaking, and then fishing and hunting, which I'm learning about more. I'm trying to
Yeah.
learn more about it. I think it's fascinating. It is, you know, literally one of the oldest like behaviors
Yeah.
humans have exhibited. So
Hmm.
I just think that that's really fascinating. And also just like the intersection of hunting and conservation, I'm trying to learn about more. So hopefully in the coming weeks, I'll have published some more articles where I explore that relationship, because even though I grew up in this space,
Hmm.
there's still so much that I don't understand, especially since I was, away for so long. And I
Yeah.
think that there is a huge percentage of the country that
Hmm.
still doesn't necessarily associate like the harvesting of wild animals to be something that's still relevant. So I'm just trying to learn more about it, trying to have more conversations with my father, about it.
Yeah.
Would like for that to bring us closer, and who knows, check in with me next year, and
Probably know a lot more.
maybe I'll have, actually experienced it myself.
Yeah. Now, when you say the word conservation, how do you mean it? And in what ways does Montana support conservation?
Well, I think that there are definitely different definitions of the conservation space. I think if we're speaking about the sportsmen of the state, of the hunters and the fishermen, I think that, outside of the pursuit of the trophy, I do think that there is an element of herd management to hunting. I mean, especially as more people move into a space, as all of those, all of those wilderness spaces that we were discussing earlier, as that acreage becomes smaller and smaller, I guess humans just have to be more mindful in how they're interacting, or potentially, and unfortunately, I guess, controlling the wildlife that also continues to cohabitate the area. So obviously I have a lot more to learn. But I know from the few conversations that I have had with people who hunt, although there are a lot of reasons for doing that, a lot of it is, tradition, family history, feeding their families. All of those are very real reasons that people still hunt here. I do think that there is an element of respect for nature too. It's just very, very ancient and very primal still.
Yeah, I find the hunters that I know, they understand this relationship with humans and nature more than most people do, and how you do have to limit the amount of hunting and tags so that the population still sustains itself, and you don't endanger the species,
Absolutely. I mean, in my experience, and I'm only speaking from my experience, but I find it to be like one of the most respectful forms of like animal harvest. I mean, there are a few outliers. Poaching is a very real thing that exists, and that is, like, seriously prosecuted. I find it to be very, very like respectful and very respectable.
So I do have a question. I don't know if you know this or not. So when they're out there just waiting for animals to show up, what are your brothers and dad doing? Are they just like chilling there? Are they listening to music? Are they in silence for hours at a time? Are they talking, drinking beers? What are they doing?
I think it certainly depends how long they've been going at it. My dad's very serious about the lunches that he packs for his excursions. So I imagine that there's a lot of snacking that happens. He's not really a sandwich guy. So as you can imagine, he brings quite the spread. I think that there is an element of, of bonding, of conversation, but they're also there with like a collective goal, and that is to not scare the animals away. So I think that they're pretty focused at that point, especially if they do have a target that they are aware of in the vicinity. I know that especially elk hunting, especially archery, is very involved. My brother is actually an archery guide. He's like a bow hunting guide.
Bow hunting's tough. That is tough.
Yeah, it's very hard. I mean, it's very involved, and his I guess job, other than finding the animal for the client, is to actually call in the target for the client. It's pretty involved just because there are a lot of like environmental factors to consider, like, you know, like wind direction and
oh wow,
yeah, things like that. So again, no expert, constantly learning.
so you really have to
But
work for it. That's what you're
yes.
saying.
Oh my God, yes. And like just the elevations that they're scaling too. I mean, it's no wonder my dad can still beat me in a foot race.
So if you have an open day, how would you choose to spend it?
I think like most things here, that's definitely dependent on the season.
Okay.
Summertime, I'm on the river, you know, either like kayaking, tubing, rafting, that sort of thing. It's very much a social activity out here. If it's colder, you know, I'd like there probably to be a fire and a beer within 3 feet of myself.
Yeah.
So,
so you do some writing. When do you do your
yes.
writing, and what space do you like to do your writing in?
Yeah, I do, you know, I guess I'm not a very organized writer, and that I don't have a lot of structure around when and where I write.
Okay.
You know, pre-COVID, God, I loved to just write at a bar. I did a lot of writing in coffee shops, in local breweries, local bars, just by myself. I find it actually easier to focus on the task at hand when there are conversations and like human interactions going on around me. So I do miss that a lot. We have a little bit of freedom here, but I'm less likely to just park myself in like a public space these days to do something like that. Otherwise, I am completing writing prompts in the early morning, like as soon as I wake up, before I have intense like tech distractions. And then I'll just try to plow through some stuff in the evening when I've open time in my home office, just playing records in the background. I like for there to be
nice,
like a little bit of noise around me.
Yeah. What do you like writing about most?
Yeah, I'm very lucky to have a nice little setup.
Yeah.
Human relationships, human conversations. Yeah, I care a lot about how we speak to each other, how we interact with each other. I care a lot about, you know, like missed connections, missed opportunities. So I write a lot about that.
Beautiful. When you think of Montana, what colors do you imagine first?
I'm always just in incredible awe over landing in the Bozeman airport in early summer, when we still have plenty of moisture, pre-fire season, so everything is green. Honestly, right now though, Rich, I'm going to say white, because we are staring about 6 months of winter in the face here. So that will be my life for the next, certainly 6 to 7 months, I imagine.
What's fire season? What do you mean by that?
We have, I mean, I guess I can lean towards calling it a problem, because it's certainly becoming more of a problem, but we have a lot of both man-made and naturally occurring wildfires that occur here. A lot of them are essential to, again, just, you know, the land regrowing itself. But unfortunately, you know, that as we experienced this summer, and as actually a lot of the West Coast experienced this summer, a lot of very devastating wildfires, unfortunately.
So what's the protocol when that happens? for people that live in the area?
I mean, we did have some recent scares, where the best that you can do is simple evacuation. We have people in place who are trained to handle things like that, but at the end of the day, you're trying to control something that is just so dramatically uncontrollable.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, man. Wow. What would you say your proudest moment as a resident has been?
um well, my high school job was actually very unique and really informed, I guess, my work ethic,
Okay.
just for the rest of my life, and continues to do so. So I worked on a ranch for 2 years. And without glorifying it too much, I cleaned out a lot of horse stalls.
Yeah.
But I worked really, really, really hard. And I think that I am just continuously trying to find the same level of motivation and hard work that 16, 17, 18-year-old
Yeah.
girl did, because that truly was a really defining moment of my life. And also, I guess, like, very unique to the environment that I grew up in. I certainly wasn't flipping burgers or, I don't know, whatever types of jobs that teenagers have these days. I have no idea.
What else did you learn while working on the ranch?
Oh boy, how to not throw your back out while stacking hay bales.
Yeah.
I mean, or, nothing too extraordinary. Certainly, it was just very simple work. It was very hard work, and that's also, work that doesn't necessarily stop when the seasons change either. So you just learn how to take in your environment and work with what you have in front of you. It was a great experience, and honestly, there's a part of me that wishes I still had something like that to go to every Saturday, because it really kicked my ass.
So a ranch, what's on the ranch? In the Midwest, there's like not ranches.
Oh yeah, true. So this ranch specifically was I worked for like the equestrian center portion of the property.
This is a big property then. They have a center, an equestrian center. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So they boarded horses. They trained horses for competition. There are a lot of lessons going on. Interestingly enough, the equestrian center that I worked for technically leased the land. So the equestrian, Governor Bruce Browner, actually, who owns a number of ranches in the area. So even before I decided to move to Illinois, I guess was familiar with at the time, the future governor of Illinois.
So he would own the horses out there or something?
Him. So he owned a number of horses there, but the entire property was his. And they traveled out to the ranch a handful of times every year. Yeah. So yeah, that was just like an interesting coincidence. Especially as I, moved to Illinois just a few years later, and then ended up being elected as governor. That was very strange.
Yeah. So what sound would you most affiliate with Montana?
Well, I think the lack of sound is kind of the whole draw of the place. Otherwise I would say wind. Surprisingly, at least in Livingston, very, very very windy place I live in. Howling winds, terrible
Okay.
winds. I also I live in what used to be an old railroad town, and we
Really?
still have a lot of trains that come through. Yeah,
Okay.
so honestly, if it's not for the lack of sound and if it's not for the wind, it's the trains, because they're coming through pretty regularly. Actually, it's very comforting in an odd way.
That's cool. That's pretty unique.
Yeah, I
What
like.
what music do people in Montana listen to?
I mean, I have to say that we all secretly love country music. I think that's a
Is that a
requirement
secret?
to.
I
I
would
think some
imagine that's
people are
like
trying to keep it a secret.
okay. So what
I'm
kind of
not.
country
I'm not
music?
ashamed.
Why should
I
anybody be
mean,
ashamed? Country music
I
is
don't think
good.
so. I know. I mean, it's a huge part of like the American zeitgeist, right?
Yeah.
But country music certainly, and when I say country, I can certainly mean like, pop country, but there's also a huge like folk scene here, Americana, if we want to get
Yeah.
into very specific subgenres.
Yeah.
Um,
Corporate
but there's
country, that's
actually
what I
really
call
great
it.
like yes. Oh, that's a good word for it. I actually never heard of it described that way. That's funny. Um, I'd say other than that, we have a great like underground indie scene. I mean, there's still so many
Mhm.
young bands here who are trying to make it.
Yeah.
A lot of really talented musicians live in the state. A lot of talented musicians flock to this state. I mean, John Mayer lives down the road most of the year. So,
Really?
yeah, yeah. Um, there's also a very accomplished like, classical and jazz music scene. And I've been very lucky to know a lot of really amazing classical musicians just growing up in that space and being able to travel to different cities in Montana to play with them. So
Yeah.
we can still compete on a classical level as well.
Nice. That's like an interesting kind of concept of like making it musically within society so that you can withdraw from society. That's kind of an interesting idea.
Absolutely. And I think that also extends to so many other occupations now too.
Yeah.
I mean, not to depart from the music conversation, but there are tech companies moving their headquarters to Bozeman, Montana, so that their employees can do a job
Mhm.
in like a collective space, but also like get away from like the rat race.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think I think everyone's kind of catching on to it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Montana seems to be positioned pretty well for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I'm here.
So when you feel overwhelmed or you need a mental escape, where do you go to clear your mind? Is there a specific place in Montana that you go?
Yeah, I guess I can just let the secret out and say that I do have a bench. I have a very specific bench
Oh,
that overlooks the Yellowstone River. Uh, done a lot of overthinking there. Done a little bit of
overthinking.
writing
Nice.
there, but mostly just a great deal of overthinking. That bench is where I do all of my overthinking. So it's nice to be back where I can just take a quick drive and get to my bench. Certainly.
Do you feel like was that a relieving thing when you like came back and then you went back to that bench and it was there like it had been and was that something pretty special in a way?
It was, and I think that really extended to the rest of the town and the rest
Yeah.
of my home. Somehow after being gone for 8 years, I came back and everything for the most part was right where I left it,
Yeah.
which I think is what you want when you're coming home.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so too. What are 3 things you think epitomizes the state?
Practical skills, practical cars, and practical shoes.
Nice.
Yes. All of these things
That all makes
need
sense.
to be functional and functioning in order to thrive here. Practical skills, practical cars, and practical shoes.
What are some practical skills you picked up growing up there?
Well, it's certainly not parallel parking, because that's not really a requirement here. There's just a lot of manual labor. I feel I grew up performing, or it just like the gumption to be able to fix things yourself. I mean, I imagine that there are adults living in more populated places that can also fix things for themselves, but I don't know. I think everyone here is sort of a real get her done attitude. At least that's how we were raised. So a lot of fencing, a lot of snow maintenance.
Oh wow, yeah.
Just
fencing.
taking care of things. Yeah.
How would you describe, as someone who doesn't know, Missoula and not Bozeman, what's the other one to the east?
Are you referring to Billings?
Yes.
Billings, yeah.
Billings and Missoula are the biggest cities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are each of them like?
So I certainly don't want to say anything disparaging about Billings in case we have any Billings residents listening today.
We're huge in Billings, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. Let's just say that Billings was always a very practical trip that our family took every August to go school shopping, because they had an actual mall.
Ooh, the mall. Yes.
They had the mall. Yeah, we take the 90-minute drive to go to the mall. Missoula, though, is definitely the most progressive pocket of the state. I mean, there's a university there. There's definitely a granola like culture, I guess we can call it. It's just, certainly a lot more liberal, a lot more fun.
It's like it's like the Austin of Montana.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great way to put it, actually. Yeah.
Huh. Interesting. What city do people go to like ski? What's like the big like ski resort town?
There are a few. So we have a ski resort nearby. Bridger Bowl is just in the Bridger Mountain Range over the hill in Bozeman. So that's pretty popular. Big Sky, for our yuppies who are listening, Big Sky is a very popular travel destination. And then we have a few in the northern part of the state, like Red Lodge, Discovery, different places like that. So we're certainly not lacking in skiing here in the state.
So you mentioned a name of a mountain range. So over here in the Midwest, mountains aren't a thing. So when we think the Rockies, we just think everybody refers to it as I'm speaking for myself, the Rocky Mountains, but you just name like a mountain range, and there's different mountain ranges in the Rockies, or what is that?
Yeah, there definitely are smaller ranges that we identify. And then, I guess you could call them foothills,
Foothills.
that are technically still part of the range, but may not have as much elevation. But I would say most of the peaks that you can see have been identified, have been named. They're on a map. And all of those peaks also, belong to, greater collections that are then found in what is known as like the Greater Rocky Mountains. So
yeah,
lot to keep track of.
A lot.
For sure.
So what would you want a non-resident of Montana to know about the state?
Certainly that it's more than just a vacation spot or a thing to use. I think it's important to keep in mind that there are real people here pursuing real goals, that have real families, that have real ambitions, and they need to be seen as such. And again, I don't think that is necessarily confined to Montana. I think that's true for a lot of Americans. I think that there is a real dichotomy that needs to be unraveled a little bit, that stresses that, a big city equates to larger ambitions. And I certainly had to train myself out of that, especially as I, moved from one to come back home, that there's just so much room for such great ambition here. And it may feel like a simpler life, but I think that we've just adapted in a way that we can achieve our goals in an alternate way.
Yeah.
Using alternate methods.
I love that. I think it's really important. So
here, I'm going to turn a light on behind. Daylight savings.
Daylight
it's
savings.
Completely dark in here. Yeah. There we go.
So
just sitting in the dark.
The last question I have, what's a phrase or mantra that sums up Montana?
Please don't move here. No. I think that the unofficial endorsement as the last best place is becoming more and more apparent, especially as, like I said, Americans are just fleeing cities as quickly as possible as the landscape changes. I made the please don't move here joke because it's certainly making it more difficult to buy real estate.
Oh, yeah.
Like I said at the top of the hour, it is really, at least in the lower 48, it is one of the final frontiers. And I certainly feel very grateful and very blessed to, have a homestead here. It's fantastic. It's just a completely new adventure that I'm very excited for.
Yeah, I'm excited for you. Wow. Well, thanks for coming on today. I appreciate that.
Thank you for having me. It was so great to catch up after, almost a decade.
Yeah. So what, anything else you want to add or?
Thank you for listening. If you want to check out some of my writing, I do go into more of these ideas in depth. You can certainly find any of my work at therightbrainranch.com. So
therightbrainranch.com.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, therightbrainranch.com. You can check me out on Instagram as well at rightbrainranch. I publish pretty consistently. So if you want to read more about, like I said, human relationships, human conversations, or if you're just really dying to know more about the intersection of conservation and hunting.
That's what I'm especially psyched up for. Yeah. Well, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Rich Conversations. Again, you can follow Steph at Right Brain Ranch. Have a day that's ambitious as the size of Montana.